Welcome to the Single Truth, real talk for single Christian women. Hi, today I'm talking with Michelle, author, speaker, founder of nonprofit Widow Goals, and host of the podcast Widowed Too Soon. Through her own story of loss and redemption, Michelle helps widows and anyone walking through grief learn how to trust God again, rebuild their life, and discover purpose on the other side of heartbreak. Michelle, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Lynella. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'd love to start with your story. You were widowed at 41, raising three children. Can you take us back to
Yes.
that season and share with us what those early days of loss were like for you and how that began your journey in finding faith and purpose again?
Yes, thank you. Well, thanks for having me. So, I think in order to understand that, we might have to go back a little further to hear some background of what my life was like and how I was basically a single mom for most of my life. You have to understand everything that happened before that. I'll give you the medium version, not the quickest, not the longest, but the medium version of a little bit of my story. So, in high school, so we're going just a couple years back, I met Luke, and Luke and I were good friends, but we never dated. Went off to college. I dated someone, he dated someone. We both had broke up with those people, came back home, and I ran into him through mutual friends. It was a very small Christian school, and we ran into each other and we fell in love over a course of about a year and decided to get married. And we got married in 2003. And right away, within a month or so, we got pregnant. Not our plans, but totally God's, which you'll see later in the story. And he had noticed this lump in his ankle. So he was 25, I was 24. I thought I was so old. And it's funny because all like my brothers were 20 when they got married, their wives were 18. So 24, I thought I was an old maid. But now I'm like, I was so young, just a few years ago. So, anyways, he had noticed this lump in his ankle. He was a mail carrier and he had a walking route. And it was just getting bigger and bigger. And actually, before we got married, he went to the doctor and they're like, "Oh, it's tendonitis. Don't worry about it." And it just kept getting bigger. And so, a few months after we got married, he went to the doctor and they were like, "Okay, we need to biopsy this." And so they did a biopsy and they said he had a very rare bone cancer, mesenchymal chondrosarcoma, very rare, usually found in kids, and they had no idea how to treat it. So they just started chemo and it was intense chemo, like 5 nights in a row at the hospital. I'd stay the night with him. I was pregnant, sleep beside him, and he'd go through his chemo. He had a great attitude too. The nurses always commented he was always reading his Bible. That was before like Bible app days, so you could actually physically see someone reading the Bible. And he was reading his Bible and just really kept a good attitude. And unfortunately, the chemo did not affect the cancer. And so we had this decision to make to either amputate his leg 2 inches below his knee or do this tumor. Like they could remove the tumor, but he'd have to wear a special boot his whole life. And there was a high chance it would come back. And so after a lot of prayer and seeking counsel from our church and everybody decided to do the amputation. That was very difficult because he was like all-star athlete, all of these things, and it completely changed him. So he had the amputation in May 7th of 2004, and very difficult. He had what was called phantom pain, where you'd feel like his foot was on fire or it was being crushed. Like it would wake him up and he'd feel this, and it was pretty awful. And I was 7 months pregnant when he had that surgery. But we always considered that his cancer-free day because thankfully the cancer was only in his ankle. We went on to have two more kids. So we had three kids, 3.5 and younger, which was
Oh
crazy.
my gosh.
But we were told like we might not be able to have more kids, but we were. So it was a kind of a crazy time. He went on disability because he tried going back to work, but it was just too hard with his prosthetic leg. He learned how to walk again, all of that, but it was very difficult. It changed who he was. And so he was on disability. And when Hayden was born, my son who's now 21, Luke was holding my hand on his crutches, didn't even have his prosthetic leg yet, and was just right by my side. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And, it was wonderful. And then they both had to learn to walk. Actually, Luke learned before Hayden, but he wasn't able to go back to work. And when Hayden was 6 weeks old, I had to work full time as a teacher. And my dream was always to be home with my kids, but because Luke was home, I couldn't. And so I would have to like pump at lunchtime, and it was just horrible. I hated it. So anyways, we went on to have the three kids. So 3.5, Hayden was 3.5, Haley was 18 months, and Peyton was a newborn. and crazy times, but I loved it. But in that time, Luke was sick a lot. And I mean, he had so many different things. And so he couldn't help with the kids a lot. So I was constantly taking them to church by myself, doing all the things. And I felt like a single mom a lot of the time, even though I had his emotional support, to talk about. And he was great with the kids when he was with them. He just couldn't help me as much as I would have liked. And those years were very lonely and very difficult. Thankfully, I had great friends and family to help. So that was kind of like the beginning of our story. 13 and a half years pass. He has lots of things: pancreatitis, cirrhosis, diabetes, like a million things, because the chemo really hurt his immune system as well. And so he would get sick all the time. So 13 and a half years pass, and he ended up getting a scan on his lungs, and they found some tumors. So what had happened, I asked his doctor, like, how did this happen? That there was like some dormant cancer cell for 13 years decided to come back in his lungs. And so we knew this time it would be terminal. So sitting down with my kids was really difficult because they were, I think at the time that started, yeah, about 9, 11, and 13. And they knew about their dad's cancer. I'd written a book about our whole first year of cancer. They'd read it. We talked about it. They knew all about it. But this time it was much more difficult taking kids through cancer with us. And so although he didn't want to do chemo, we didn't have a lot of other options. We tried. There was nothing else it's very rare cancer. So he started to chemo, and the kids had to see him get sick and just all the things that come with that. And it was horrible. and nothing worked. About 2.5 years, I think. Yeah, about 2.5 years he fought it, and it just didn't work. And so we just made the most of our time that we had together. We got to go to Disneyland. There's this place called the Dream Foundation that grants last wishes to terminal adults. And they took us to Disneyland. We just enjoyed every moment. The chemo eventually, it didn't work. So then it was like, okay, now it's just about quality of life and spending every moment together. And the end of his life was 2020. And so we got a lot of time together because of COVID. The kids were home. And we look at that now as a blessing because we got so much time with him. My daughter and I were supposed to take an eighth grade trip to Washington, D.C. It got canceled. And now we look at that as an extra week with her dad. We just really embraced the carpe diem, seize the day. And we did so many beautiful things together and just really enjoyed every moment. On May 22nd, his hospice nurse came and said, you're declining. You're going to need a hospital bed soon. And it was just kind of the beginning of, like, she told me, I think he has about a month, maybe 6 weeks left. May 23rd, I woke up to the light turning on, and he was still completely functional at this point. And I was like, what's going on? It was like 4 a.m. And he's like, my calf really hurts. Can you get me a heating pad? Can you get me ice? We were trying all these different things. And all of a sudden he wasn't able to breathe. I called the hospice nurse, put him on the oxygen, all the things. His eyes rolled back in his head. And I'm so thankful the kids were not there. They didn't have to see everything I saw. And the nurse told me it was time to wake up my kids. And so I will never forget, my daughter was 14. I will never forget waking her up and saying, it's time to say goodbye to daddy. And she's like, it's not time. It's not time, because I just told them 4 to 6 weeks. And I was able to call his mom, call my mom, and we were able to be with him about an hour. By the time they got in the room, he was not suffering. He was just looking up in the corner. And God gave me the most supernatural peace I'd ever experienced, where I was able to just walk through my kids through this. I wasn't crying. I was like, talk to him. He can hear you. And I was talking to Luke, and I was saying, like, you're going to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant today. And I was like, you're going to meet my grandparents. And I was just like able to be completely calm and just help guide the kids, talk to him. And in fact, my son and I, he was 12 at this time, we were just talking about this last night. He's 17 now. And just about like how they were able to talk to him and what that was like and what they were saying to him and who was there. And we were just talking through it. And it ended up being like very peaceful. And my daughter, she's like the biggest daddy's girl, and she loved singing, and she sang to him their song, which is You're My Sunshine, which was beautiful. And then we turned on this song, I Can Only Imagine, which, if you don't know, it's about heaven. And he actually took his last breath during that song, because then the nurse came in and said he's no longer with us. And it was in that moment that I was still calm for a little bit, but watching the kids kiss their dad goodbye is something that I'll never forget, and that pain is, there every time I think about it. They shouldn't have to go through that. And after they left, so the kids all said goodbye to him, and then it was just myself and my mom in the room with Luke's body, and I laid on the bed and just held his hand. Just then I let it all go and just wailed that. I know you've been through grief in your life, so you get that deep wail that like you can't put into words really. That if you've heard someone wail that, you recognize that you're like, that's that deep wail, and just let it all go. My kids have told me later, like they remember hearing that from the other room. And then my life was completely changed in an instant. I suddenly was not married in one instant. I went from married to widowed in an instant, although I knew this was happening. Oh, and I always forget to tell the rest of the story. So we thought we had 4 to 6 weeks left, but they think what happened is that he had a blood clot. That's why he kept complaining about his calf. And then if it either went to his heart or his lungs, and his lungs were so full of cancer that he couldn't survive it. But we look at it as a blessing because he did not want to go downhill where we had to like do everything and change him and feed, all those things. He did not want that. And so we can look at that as a blessing also. But we were shocked because it was supposed to take a lot longer. So I was shocked at that moment that he was gone because we thought we had a lot longer. And I'll never forget like leaving the house, his hospice nurse, she was an angel. I always call her our hospice nurse. She told us to get the kids out so they wouldn't have to see the coroner come and all of that. And I'll never forget coming back to the house, how empty it felt, and just seeing his prosthetic leg laying on at the bed, the ice melted on the floor in a bag, just all of it. And it was the most like lonely I've ever felt. Like when you feel like when you watch someone's soul leave their body, it is something you cannot describe. And there's something beautiful. I like to share this part. So, I was saying his eyes were locked in the corner. Well, about 2 months later, I went to a grief retreat and I got this vision completely from God. It might sound crazy to people, but I know that God gave it to me. We were doing this session when we were like, okay, God, show me where you were in my darkest moment. Of course, I was brought back to Luke's deathbed, but this time I actually experienced it as him. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but I know that God gave this to me and it's brought peace to so many people. So I just want to share it. I was suddenly like hearing his thoughts and I was seeing me and my family like surrounding him. And it was the most peaceful I've ever felt in my entire life. Like it was unreal. And the thoughts in my head as Luke were, I feel so peaceful. I don't feel any pain. And I'm okay to leave my family because that was his biggest fear. Like, I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave you. And in the corner where I was like, are you seeing angels? Jesus was just kind of like floating up there. I could see it so clearly and I could hear the song I Can Only Imagine. And as it ended, as Luke, I followed him to this light. That's this vision God gave me. And I shared that at the grief retreat. And so many people are like, that gives me like so much peace because I don't know what my loved one was going through. Because for 2 months, I had been like, what? He was trying to talk also. I forgot to say that part. And I was like, it's okay. We know you love us. And he was trying to say something. And so for months, I'm like, what was he saying? What was he thinking? What was he feeling? Did he know? And God gave me this beautiful vision. So it was amazing. But back to my story. There's so much in my story. We haven't even got to the part where you asked me what was like in the beginning. But there's so much before all of that. So suddenly widowed, was very lonely. I didn't have any friends that understood what I was going through. And I think if you're a single parent in any way, you could feel like that. You can feel like, I don't have any parents. I don't have friends who get this. Like, and
Right.
I imagine our experiences are very parallel in that, like, looking at happy couples, looking at families, you feel like I don't belong there anymore. Who am I? I'm not married. All those things as a single mom, as someone suddenly single goes through is like, where's my place? Where's my identity? And what I had to learn was my identity was not in being married. It was, who am I in Christ? Like,
Right.
that's it, right? Because all of us who've been married and then not married, however it happened, widowed, divorce, whatever, we get that. Like, that identity is gone. And then I was like, no, this label doesn't define me. Like, I'm not defined by a label. I'm defined by, like, I'm a daughter of the King. Like, that's who I am first and foremost, right? I know you get that. Like,
Yes.
that's who I am. And so as I began my widow journey, it was a lot of falling flat on my face, crying. And I'm sure we can all, as listeners on this podcast, relate to that, where you just feel so lost. And God, are you there? And I was always covered by the peace that passes all understanding. Like God has always met me there in those darkest moments. And I started just rebuilding my life one day at a time, more like one moment at a time. I couldn't think about tomorrow. It was today. And for those of us that are widowed, we've got to think of all of the, burial plans right away. They call you that day. You got to make decisions. Anyone who's gone through grief with a loved one knows this. Like there's so much to do right in the beginning. And it's like you can't think about anything. And this is how I explain grief. And so here's a great explanation of grief. Grief is the loss or change of any pattern in your life. It's not just death. It's not just divorce. It's anytime things change. Grief, this is how I felt. In the beginning, it was like cloudy every day. It was thunderstorms, awful. This is what I felt like. No sun anywhere to be found. And then one day, I saw a little bit of sun. I smiled. And then the next day, a little bit more. And eventually, as we work through our grief, we have to do something with our grief. We can't just expect it's going to get better. But as we work through it, it becomes sunny most of the time. And then you'll have a thunderstorm here or there. Right. And the best thing, I've learned so much about grief. And I know everyone listening has been through grief. So I'd love to share some of that. The biggest thing that I explain to my podcast listeners is what we feel, God can heal. So I'll say it again, what we feel, God can heal. Don't stuff down your feelings, because if you stuff it down, you're never going to work through it. You have to feel those feelings. So a lot of people in grief, whether it's death or divorce or whatever it is, they think, I'm just going to keep busy. I'm just going to keep busy. I'm not going to deal with it. Well, what happens is it's going to be there later. So I love using this explanation. Let's say I go to my car right now and there's a flat tire and I'm like, you know what? I'll come back in a year. It'll be better. Well, I go to a year later, it's still flat because I didn't do the work. I didn't hook up the air. I didn't put the air in it. And that's the same with our grief. If we don't work through it, that means actually letting ourselves feel it. We're going to be in the same place 5 years, 10 years. I mean, I've worked with widows who are in the same place 10 years down the road because they just stuff it and they never deal with it. So also grief is like, if you've ever read the little book when your kids are little called Going on a Bear Hunt, it's like, can't go around it, can't go under it, can't go over it. You've got to go through it. And it's the same thing with grief. And so we have to let ourselves feel it. And so that's one of the biggest things I learned about grief in my processing was like, you have to feel it. The other thing I love to educate people on is you don't actually have to go through all these stages. So Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross created the stages of grief for those dying, not for those grieving. So somewhere along the way, it got changed into this place of like, oh, I have to feel all these things. So a couple months into my journey, I learned that. And I was like, that brings such relief because I didn't go through anger. I didn't go through this one. And so I like people to know that too, because they can think, what's wrong with me? I'm not going through all this. It's because you don't have to. So anyways, I learned a lot about grief. I learned a lot about identity. And I started really pouring into my healing. I tell people your healing is your job when you're going through grief, whatever brought the grief. Like that is your job. You need to treat it like a job. Because if you want to move forward in the future, you've got to work on it every single day. So what does that mean? Like, how do I work on it? Journaling is a huge thing. Grief counseling, regular counseling. I went to a grief retreat. I mean, whatever that you can go to. And grief doesn't, when I say grief, I mean, I'm talking about going through divorce and all of that. When I went to my grief retreat, there were people there for divorce as well, because that's a huge grief.
Yeah.
And it's working on yourself, reading books, on your knees, talking to God, listening to worship music. Like really, you have to make time for it. I know it's hard when you're a single mom and you're taking care of your kids, because what I felt is I had two different kinds of grief. And you could relate this to divorce as well. I had the grief for my kids that they lost their father. You could have the grief for your kids that they're no longer, with their father, they're divorced. But then I had the grief that I lost my husband. And so it was like carrying two different kinds of grief. And so my counselor would ask me each week, what are you doing for you? You got to put on your oxygen mask before you take care of those around you. So every single week. So I'd have to be doing something for me. So I took up new hobbies. I learned how to line dance. I met a couple other widows and we started line dancing. I got a paddleboard and started paddleboarding. I just really dove into like figuring out, like, of course I would never choose this life, but I remember the moment that I was like, my life is like a blank slate now. I can literally do it. I have no one I have to ask about anything. I can literally do whatever I want. And so I decided to start trying new things and embracing my singleness rather than like feeling like it was this punishment, which actually leads me to the next thing I want to talk about. Up until 2 months after Luke died, I would question God and say, what did I do wrong? Am I being punished because my husband died? Like, why is this happening? And at the same grief retreat with you, I had the other vision. We did this really beautiful experience. Now, if you're not a Christian, it might sound totally crazy, but I know you'll get this. So it was this like overlooking this gorge. The camp was there, which I ended up having Luke's Celebration of Life there too, which was beautiful
Oh, yeah.
because everything was closed because of COVID, but they opened it up for me, which was amazing. So there were these 3 crosses and they had red paint, and you put red paint on your hands and put it onto the cross. And they said, I want you to like look into Jesus's eyes and feel his pain. It was like an intense moment of like, what did it, how often do we actually think about that? What he went through for us. And as I did that, I felt his pain, and then I just collapsed to the ground, and I was brought back to Luke's deathbed in my mind. But this time it was different. Jesus was there, and he put a crown on my head and said, I am so proud of you. Like, I chose you out of all the people in the world to be Luke's wife and to walk him through death. And I'm so proud of you. And in that moment, everything changed. I went from being punished to being chosen. And so how I like to tell this to people who aren't widowed, think of anyone, and I know this relates to you, anyone in your life that you loved that you lost, and God chose you to be in their life. And it's a privilege. It's such a privilege to be chosen to love that person until they die. And so, hopefully that can help people reframe in their mind people that they've lost, and that it's a privilege. In fact, I do widow events and things, and I did a book launch, and I gave out these little crowns, like little keychains to remind people. And I have one too, that like, this isn't a punishment. Like, I was chosen, and like God has chosen us for every person. And it doesn't even have to be someone that you've lost. Think about anyone in your life. God's chosen you in this time period with this person to love them, even if they're not the easiest to love, and just remembering that. And so that moment kind of changed everything for me. And then I decided, I don't know, maybe 6 months into my journey, like, I want to do some good with this. Like, if I had to go through this, I'm going to do something good. And I was starting to get healing and feel better and be joyful again. And it's only by God. Like, I tell people, yeah, there's a lot of great tools I can tell you about that help with grief and healing, but God is the ultimate healer. It's not us. It's not the tools. He
Yeah.
is the ultimate one who can take beauty and make beauty from ashes, and he can turn mourning into dancing. Like, that's actually my favorite verse about God taking mourning into dancing and replacing my mourning clothes and all of that stuff, because it's such a beautiful, I've actually experienced it. And in fact, I'm doing a widow's retreat, and the theme is mourning to dancing. And we're literally having dancing. We're having line dancing one of the nights. So that's
Oh,
a
fun.
big theme to me, like, because I know what that's like. But as I experienced this healing, I'm like, I need to tell other people. So I believe the first thing I started was the TikTok channel. Started one called Widow Goals, and I just started sharing what had helped me. And lots of people related and followed me, and I found this huge community on TikTok, and I was like, this is needed. And then I had met a widower, and we were pretty good friends. We met through Facebook, and we decided, we were in this group, and they were like turning to all the wrong things. We're like, they need Jesus. Let's start a podcast, and let's share them with Jesus. And
Uh-huh.
I think it's still the only Christian widow podcast that I know of. And we had also the interesting perspective of a widower, and he had young kids, and a widow who has teenagers. And so we just talked through life. So we started that 11 months after Luke died. I started that. And we have been going for 4 years now. And it's been an amazing thing. In fact, when my co-host left, I was like, yeah, maybe it's time to be done. I'm literally walking, and I see this vision in my mind, and it was me handing megaphones to people. And I felt like God was saying, you're not done yet. Look at all these other people who have their stories to share. And so now I'm an interview podcast mostly. So I interview widows about all their different experiences. And, so I just started doing things. And then the other big thing that I decided to do, I searched high and low for any groups for widows, and I could not find it. It's probably very similar for those divorced, but church can be one of the loneliest places.
Yeah.
And yeah, what I was talking about, like, you feel like you don't fit in and all of that. And I couldn't find any groups anywhere. So I started a group. I started a nonprofit called Widow Goals, and it's widows helping widows not only survive, but thrive. And so we meet the third Monday of every month. We've been doing it 3 years now, and we rotate houses. I just did a Friendsgiving with 20 widows at my house, and we have widows all ages from in their 30s to in their 80s, but we all get it. We all have this common, theme. And then other widows wanted to start it in their cities. So I have groups in over 30 cities. I just told them, like, I trained them on what I did. We have a Facebook group where I have all these videos and train them how to do it. And so we're all over. And so I started that. And then with the nonprofit, we also hold retreats. So like I was talking about, my third retreat is going to be in Dallas in January. We have over 70 registered now. And so it's a big retreat. Our other ones were like 20. So I'm very excited about that. And then I wrote a book. I had started it in the very beginning of my journey, had no idea what I was talking about. So I'm glad I only wrote 3 chapters. And then it was just a few months away from the 5-year anniversary of Luke's death. And I was like, I'm going to finish it in order to honor him. And so I created Widow Goals, Steps to Finding Peace When You Lose Your Spouse. And, I've actually had a lot of people who aren't widowed who have read it, who have told me that it's helped them. If you're on video, you can see it right here. And I decided that I wanted to get it done. And so I just buckled down. I wrote it in like 3 or 4 months, just like that's all I did, just write my book every day. And ended up being a really beautiful experience, and was able to do a book launch and launch it on the 5-year anniversary of his death. And it's basically like 30 goals for people going through grief. I mean, it's specifically for widows, but like I said, other people have read it. And it's things like get out of bed. I mean, you can probably relate to a lot of these re-enter social situations. I'm sure that changes when you're divorced as well. And so many people have told me, I didn't have this with Luke because we didn't have a lot of couple friends, but I bet with divorce, it's the same thing, that your couple friends change completely. Did you find that to be true?
Yeah, I found that everything about life shifted and changed. And I do think that, going back to what you had said about, your identity,
Yes,
in an instant, I was like, "Oh, okay, I know how do I identify here?"
exactly.
And my filter was really about being a human, and walked through so many of those same learning lessons that you did
Mhm.
to get to my identity isn't
Right?
about being a human. I'm experiencing this opportunity at life as being a human, but
Right.
it's really about my identity and how am I defined through God and being created in his image and his purpose and plan for my
Yeah.
life. I don't think I learned it as quickly as you did though, because I have
We all
been
have different
single and
journeys.
on my own for over a couple of decades, but,
Yeah.
it's
Everybody's journey is different.
yes, and every piece of it, I look back on it. You had mentioned, you the during 2020 and the extra week, right? The trip was canceled, which feels, devastating and like a loss in of itself. But then when you move forward through those hard
Yes.
times, you get to look back on it and say, well, God actually put something really wonderful
Yes.
in place of that. And my filter for it was very different from what the outcome of it was.
Mhm.
And so a lot of those opportunities I've had in the
Yeah.
last few decades, which I wouldn't give any back, even though
Right.
some were really hard.
Yeah,
But that's what's
exactly.
really built the depth in the trust for, I know God is there
Yes.
all day, every
Yes.
day, and he's always shown up. Even if
Mhm.
I thought, oh my gosh, I can't take one more step or one more breath and move forward. That just some miracle would just come and just
Yes.
open the door and lift
Yeah.
whatever that was.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I kinda took us a little bit off, but, it
No, it's
it helped to really bring in focusing on what mattered
yeah,
in who I am and
exactly.
whose I am.
Yeah, and in fact, something you said reminded me of this, that, because we can look back and see, like, we are who we are because of our experiences. So again, my 17-year-old, he likes to ask a lot of like deep questions. Just a couple nights ago, because he's like, I don't know if I'd ever want to get married because so many end in divorce or death. And, I'm like, but you don't want to live in fear. We're trying to talk through that. And he was like, if you knew on your wedding day to daddy that he would die, would you still do it? And I said, yes, in a heartbeat. Well, first of all, you came
Yeah.
from this, and it has made me who I am today. And I'm like, I would have never chose this, but my whole life, like, all I do is work with widows now. Like, that's what my whole life is about. Like, I wouldn't be doing what God's calling is on my life. And so
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to know on that day that that was coming eventually, but I can look back and be like, yeah, I would do it again, because that's made me who I am today. And I was going to mention some of the chapters in the book that I feel like relate to anybody going through grief. So like I said, the first one's get out of bed, call on your tribe, let the tears flow freely. Remember to take care of yourself. Don't be
Mhm.
surprised by anxiety. Focus on today. And here's a big one: let go of why. We're never going to understand all the whys in life, right? So we can go around and around and around. Why this happened to me? Why this? Blah, 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 blah. It's like, it doesn't do any good. Discover your new normal, right? Whether you're death or divorce, it's going to look different and it's never going to be the same. Because people ask me all the time that are going through, they lost a spouse, when is it going to be normal again? I'm like, it's not. It's going to be a new normal, but it can still be beautiful. In fact, at a grief retreat, I love this example. We had everybody come in and we had these little like flower pots and we had like markers and paints. And we said, paint a picture of what your life looked like before your spouse died. So it could be before you were divorced. It could be the same kind of thing. And of course, they're already crying making these. And then they dry. We come back later in the retreat and we said, now we put them in plastic bags. Now we want you to drop them and break them. And it was very emotional. This is like the moment he died. And then we had these like beautiful glass pieces and we ended up giving them, like they would hand us the old pieces and then we'd say like, we're going to act like we're God. And we're like, here's some other pieces to put with it. We made like a mosaic that was so beautiful. I still have mine with the old pieces and the new. And we told them, this is what like your life is now. You'll always have some of your old pieces, but you also have new and you can be beautiful in a new. It'll never look the same. So you got to let go of that expectation. My life is going to look the same and just know that's going to be a new beautiful. And so I like to encourage people that, yeah, it's never going to be the same. Don't fall for counterfeit comfort. There's so many things that try to give us comfort that aren't Jesus. And so that whole chapter is about that and ways that I feel like I kind of fell for counterfeit comfort in the beginning. I have a chapter about dating and I mean, just all kinds of things. Know that it's okay to be angry. That's a big one. Like, it's okay to be angry. This one is especially when someone dies. Give yourself permission to remember honestly, even the hard parts. When someone dies, we tend to just like remember the good and kind of put them on a pedestal. And so it's really important to, I didn't speak anything negative about Luke for a couple months until my counselor was like, these things are facts. They happened. You can talk about them. And so that's a message I like to get across to people. And then I think the most important chapter is have an eternal perspective. Like, this world
Yeah.
is not our home. Like, I've gone through times when I'm very sad because I have friends who are widowed who then they like their husbands, I've had a couple of these, died of cancer and then they get cancer. And I'm like, God, this isn't fair. Like, and I hear every time, this world is not our home. This world, like whenever I'm overwhelmed by all the negative going on in this world, I just hear that,
Yeah.
that this is just like a blip. Like, we need to remember our eternal perspective and remember that like this is nothing compared to where we're going to be. I've been reading this great book called Imagine Heaven. I believe it's John Burke, and it's so good. It's about all these near-death experiences and just what, we think heaven is going to be like it's a whole nother dimension we cannot even imagine. Like, we don't, our minds can't even comprehend it. And just remembering that this world is full of trouble, death, divorce, grief, all the things. We're not going to have that in heaven. Like, what an amazing thing. I like our minds can't even really comprehend that, And so I guess that's my story. I mean, that's some of it. There's so much more, but my whole world now. So I was a teacher before I was widowed and my entire world shifted. I went back to teaching for a long-term sub for like 3 or 4 months and decided it wasn't for me, that I want to work with widows. Like, I still teach. It's just in a much different way. So I have a really large online community, both on TikTok and Facebook. And so I work with them. I do my podcast, my book, retreats, groups, that kind of thing, and really just work to support widows to know that it's not always going to hurt this bad, which is the same as when you're divorced. Like, it's not going to hurt this bad forever. The very beginning where it just feels horrible. Like, nothing ever is going to be good again. But it
Yeah.
does, because God, because he heals us, And so my passion now is just helping anyone through grief. In fact, I'm going to take the book I already wrote and change it and create it for everyone, called Grief Goals instead of Widow Goals. I'm also
Oh,
launching a second podcast called Grief Goals in the next couple weeks, hopefully, so that I can take what I've learned and apply it more to everyone and be able to help more people. And so I speak at retreats and different places and like just encouraging people. And another, just real quick, since I've talked forever, but another piece of my story is a very short version about my husband, Joel, that I'm now married to. So Joel and I went to college together. So it's kind of funny. Remember, Luke and I went to high school together, but Joel and I went to college together. And then on Facebook one day, about a year after Luke died, it said, someone you may know. And it said Joel. And I was like, I don't really remember him. Kind of remember the name. We were like acquaintances more like in college. And then we just started chatting and we started FaceTiming like every day. And then he lived in Louisiana and he had family out in my area in Washington, and so he flew out here, and by the first time we met, he told me he loved me, and it moved kinda quickly, and we got married about a year and a half later. We've been married 2.5 years, and that's a whole, blending families, all the stuff. He has 4 kids, I have 3, but it's been an amazing experience. But I like to share with people, like, he isn't what healed me. He isn't what made me whole. It was Jesus. He's just a blessing on top of that. Same grief retreat where I had those other visions. It was like an amazing time. I'm walking in this field, and all of a sudden, I have this memory of being in this field at camp as a kid and like jumping around, having so much fun. And God said, 2 things I heard in my head. So when I say God said, it's like a thought in my head. He said, I'm going to restore the joy of your youth. Because I was like really carefree and fun when I was young, and then cancer for years took a toll on me. And then he said, I'm going to redeem and restore everything you lost in your marriage. So I was like, what? So I knew I was going to get married again. I didn't know who, how, when, but I always knew I wanted to get remarried. And so, it wasn't really a surprise when Joel came. I mean, I didn't know who it would be. And I had all the bad dating apps experiences before all that. That's a whole other episode about all the
Oh, yes,
wow,
for sure.
how dating has changed from in your 20s when there was no texting to all of a
Right.
sudden, and people want to go inappropriate in 2 seconds. I'm like, what is happening? What is in this
Yeah,
world? Like, so actually
right?
what drew me to Joel was he was the only one pretty much that didn't go inappropriate. Like he was very like talking about Jesus, and like I was like, okay, this guy's different. And he's divorced and has his own, grief story and all of that about losing his family. But it was a beautiful thing that God brought us together. But he is not the reason that I'm healed and happy. He's just a bonus. And actually, like God, I know He ordained this because I could not do what I do without Him financially. Like, I'm not surprised we don't make money podcasting and barely any from books and all that stuff. So it's really a ministry. And if it wasn't for us being married, I definitely could not do this. And so I know it's part of God's plan for my ministry to widows. And it also takes a special man to love a widow because we talk about Luke, we have pictures of Luke, and he's good with
Yeah.
it and he supports, all of this. So, yeah, in a nutshell, that's my story. But I just love encouraging people who are going through grief specifically that it's not going to always be this bad and that God does have a plan. To all those single moms out there, He sees you. He knows every tear. He collects our tears in a bottle. I'm always like,
Mhm.
you must have a big bottle for me because I got a lot of tears. I know we all feel that way. When you feel so alone, because I felt alone before Luke died because I had to do almost everything by myself. And then I felt really alone after he died because I didn't even have anyone to talk to. And you just, that pressure of like, I have no one else to help me with this decision, like for my kids.
Yes.
And I have to do everything and I got to be in all these places at one time. And like, God, I can't do this. But He always meets us there, right? Like He always has a way of helping us. And so I just want to encourage the listeners who could be single moms, just like struggling to make it through the day. And you're like, nobody knows. Well, He does. I promise. He sees what,
Mhm.
and you know what? I believe that I'm supposed to share this part of it. Like He chose you, like to be a mother to that child, like just like they know that you were chosen. Like He chose you for this role because like He knew that you would do a good job with this role. And so all those times when you feel alone and you feel like nobody sees us, nobody gets us, He does. I promise. I promise He sees you and He is going to carry you through this. He is going to help you. So many times when I didn't have a husband, I considered God my husband, like as far as like, I don't have anyone to make decisions, God, like I need your help. And I feel like he really did direct me. And so direct your questions to God about what do I do for this child? What do I do in this situations? And listen and really dive into seeking comfort from Him because He's really the only one that can give us the comfort we want. And really He's the only one that can he is our identity. We are a child of the King, a daughter of the King. Like I have this image, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like it was floating around social media a while ago of this little girl with a crown on her head, like a big crown. And it's like, that's what I see when I picture how God sees us. Like He sees us like that. And we need to remember that. So guess that's my story a little bit.
Yes. I'll add to that. I'll often say to women that I'm talking with about, the hard time of
Yeah.
being on your own when it really wasn't your decision and you didn't
Yeah.
have any control over that happening because let's face it, right? Like it's different when it's out of your control and it happens
Yeah.
versus a decision that you come into and you choose for your life.
Right.
But I will often say to them, really think about how you love your child and multiply that by
Yeah.
1,000,000.
Yeah.
That's how much God shows up for you.
That's right.
What you wouldn't do for your child, he will do for you over and over and over in the most unconditional, loving, always
Mhm.
there for you. He didn't ever say it was gonna be easy. That's not
Right.
promised anywhere in
Right.
the Bible that I have heard of.
In this world, you will have troubles.
Yes, and embracing those troubles with those are God's gifts in your growth and in your deepening, your knowing and your understanding of you and him and that relationship that you have with each
Mhm.
other. Because like you had mentioned, we are here. We're just here for a blip. There's a purpose in the blip.
Yes, there is.
Everybody has a purpose in that blip and to really embrace and loving your life here
Yes.
is diving into that and understanding
Mhm.
and knowing you are chosen. You said that as well. You're chosen. Everyone is handpicked, chosen to be here to
Yep.
live out that purpose that
That's
he has
right.
placed in your life.
That's right.
And you can get there, right? Even when it's hard and even
Yeah.
when it feels like, yes, I absolutely cannot take one more step. I
Yeah.
I really learned that he was the wind in my wings when I needed it
Yes.
and just picked up one foot and just kept putting it in front of me. I didn't always know where I was going, and I did learn too, like, you know what? Just show me my next right step. I
Yes.
didn't have to know tomorrow or next
Right.
week, next year, the next 10 years. Here I am, a few decades later. I didn't need to know all of these things.
Right.
I needed to have that next right step.
Yes, that's right.
So, gosh, I just wanna say thank you so much
Oh,
for
you're welcome.
sharing all of your wisdom, your heart, your story. I teared up there a little bit.
Tears
I
are
was trying to
healing.
keep it together. Gosh, we could definitely share more deep stories in the grief, and
Yes.
even though, yes, it was my mom that I lost, but still,
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of those same things that you were
Yep.
speaking about. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I felt those things." And, how do you ride through them? Um, I appreciate you saying, anger doesn't have to be a part of it either. We don't
Yes.
have to carry that anger stage that we were taught,
Yeah.
was one of the 5 of, you know,
Uh-huh.
getting through the hard times, because I really wasn't ever angry about my mom passing either, as I was
Right.
very, very confident and peaceful in knowing where she was and that I will
Mhm.
get to see her again someday.
Yes,
So
that's right.
with that, is there anything else that you would love to share? Like maybe
Yeah.
one thing that is just like, if you got nothing else today, here's this one thing for the listeners.
Yeah, I think it's just worth repeating. What we feel, God can heal. Like, don't stuff it down. I don't care if you're in the grocery store, you're in car pickup line. Your healing is too important to care what people think. So let yourself feel it. That's one thing I always share. And then I also wanted to share if people have any questions or want to contact me, they can email me, michelle@widowgoals.org. If you happen to be widowed or know someone widowed, Widowed Too Soon podcast. And my book is also on Amazon.
Thank you so much for spending this time with the Single Truth today. Remember, you are chosen, you are loved, and your glory story with God is still being written. If this episode encouraged you, please follow, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs some hope today. I'm cheering you on as you walk in His glory, one step at a time.
I used to search the world for meaning, trying to earn what was already mine. But your love called out my name, and it opened up my eyes. No longer chasing every shadow, I found my worth in who you are. Now I stand in holy freedom, with heaven in my heart. I'm not broken, I am glory. Your truth is where I stand. Every promise you of your love that can't be erased.